Welcome, Wargamers, to the inverted underworlds of the mortal realms, because today we are talking about the Nighthaunt, one of the most recent factions to get a new battle tome in Age of Sigmar 3rd edition. Now, I already have a lore series for this faction up. I'm not going to take those down because, they're there for people if they want to watch them, but I wanted to redo a lot of the lore series now that I'm getting better and better at this, and so we're going to kick this off with a great discussion about the origins of the Nighthaunt, and then talk more about them as the week goes on. Now, real quick before we begin, I wanted to give a shout out to a small business that reached out to me asking if I could just kind of promote their store a little bit, and that's going to be Grot Skull's Workshop over on Etsy, and they produce some really cool gaming tokens with custom designed backgrounds to match each Grand Alliance. I brought a whole bunch down to Vault Wars when I went down there as door prizes. Basically, I was just a middleman. I was giving them all away, so it's not a paid promotion or anything like that. I just wanted to help another small business out with a product that helped me remember all kinds of buffs and debuffs and stuff like that. Gaming aids are aplenty, and so anything that can help you remember your rules and stuff like that is a huge win. There is a discount code that goes to the entire rest of the month. It's DDUGDiscount22. Like I said, it's not an affiliate link. It's not, a paid promotion. It's just I wanted to shout out a small business because they asked. And as a small businessman myself, a rising tide raises all ships. So go check out Grot Skull's Workshop. Now, for those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar or the Nighthaunt faction, the Nighthaunt are an incredibly interesting army in the Grand Alliance of Death. They generally serve as Nagash's vanguard, meaning the first wave of assault when Nagash wants to take over an area. And, on the surface level, that makes perfect sense right there. They tend to be very mobile, they can fly, they don't have to have any resupply or anything like that. There's no time in creating them like, say, the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. And, it turns out being able to phase through walls is a really nice skill to have when you are the front lines of an assault. Now, if you want to see them battling in action, I highly, highly recommend the book Soul Wars by Josh Reynolds. It's a great description. The last third of that book really shows you what it is like when a Nighthaunt army descends upon a city. We're going to talk about that more this week, but if you want a blow-by-blow visual of it, there's no better place. Now, that being said, they do have a very specific role in the forces of Nagash. They're not entirely defined by that, though, because there's a lot more going on. One of the reasons I love the Nighthaunt is because we were there when they were born. That is, the Necroquake. And we're going to talk all about their birth and their origins and that kind of stuff here in a second. And while it might just seem like the theme of the army is spectral ghosts and geists and all this kind of thing, I would posit that the true theme of Nighthaunt as a faction is punishment. Or, inversely, justice. Depends on whose eye you're looking from. From Nagash's perspective, it is justice in action. From everyone else, it is eternal damnation and punishment. But to explore the difference between just being ghosty boys and the idea of punishment/justice, we need to talk a little bit more about the foundational lore of the Nighthaunt, because the Necroquake didn't just make a new faction, it altered the concept of death in the mortal realms, and when people die is directly tied to how the Nighthaunt get reinforcements. So I've kind of broken this video down into three parts of, there's Shyish before Nagash and the Necroquake, there's what the Necroquake did, and what things are like now. So kicking off before Nagash has truly kind of consumed in Shyish, as it were, when a person would die in any realm, they would go down to the underworlds. Specifically their own underworld. So I'm going to pick on, real world religions because it gives us kind of a conceptual idea. But let's say, for example, that a Christian dies. They would either go to heaven or hell. Both of those underworlds take on reality within Shyish. It's a realm of pocket dimensions where everyone's afterlife is true. So if you are a Christian and you did some great sin and you believed you were going to hell, that's where you would go. Conversely, if you were righteous and thought you deserved to go to heaven, that's where you would go. If you were, a Viking warrior, you would go to Valhalla because it would become real. And so Shyish is sort of like a honeycomb of all these different afterlives, of different belief structures, and they're just kind of swirling in mass together. When civilizations fade, like let's say for example there were no more Christians on the planet, so too would those pocket realms that they believed in begin to fade until they kind of just drifted off into pure oblivion. Now it's important to note that sometimes these little pocket worlds would interact with one another, and you'd get some really weird crossovers, and that might be an easy thing to gloss over. You know, when you're reading the battle tomes, in my opinion, sometimes the battle tome information can be a little bit dry, and so you'll read a line that's like, all afterlives are real in Shyish, and sometimes they overlap, right? And that's, you know, you can look at that and be like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. But then when you really think about it, it gets real rough, real fast. Like imagine you and your Free Guild Guard regiment come up over a hill and you see Jesus fighting the Beast of Revelation. And from the right comes warriors of Valhalla pouring into the fracas looking for glory. And then the ground begins to shake, and up in the sky it's the planet Kolob of the Mormons looming overhead like it's the new frickin' Bad Moon. And if that wasn't enough god-tier WrestleMania drama, Vishnu comes out of the side with a metal chair to the back of Jesus' head. And oh snap, Anubis has arrived and his boys are taking the party to the next level. Meanwhile, your Free Guild general next to you hands you a musket and a 4XL codpiece and says, "Tame this land in the name of Sigmar." And as much as I poke fun, it's a wild and diverse place. This is what I'm saying, is like, you think about how different the belief structures are that we are familiar with here on Earth, and you magnify that by the ridiculous, outlandish fantasy that exists in Age of Sigmar. You can easily see Shyish being a place of like intense, like everything's just going off the rails. In addition to these afterlives being absolutely real, ghosts, of course, do exist in the setting, and sometimes they'll just drift around if they didn't have a particular belief structure or something like that. They just kind of move around as random wraiths, or maybe spirits will stir, near natural deposits of death magic, or places that great atrocities have happened, but that's really about it. For the most part, people die, they go to their respective afterlives, and then drift into oblivion. Now, regarding what Nagash and the Necroquake did, I've talked about it quite a bit on the channel, so if you want to learn more about that, there's tons of videos I have, one dedicated completely to the Necroquake. I'm going to stick to how it affected Shyish and the spirits there. Nagash goes and collects a whole bunch of black sand or grave sand from the edges of the realm and brings them to the center to build a grand black pyramid. This black pyramid inverts death magic, where it's normally concentrated on the rim of the realms, like all the other realms are. Instead, now the most concentrated point of death is in the dead center of it. So rather than, the realms or the continents rather drifting outward, now they're drifting inward, and it's almost consuming itself. Almost like it's a great maw just eating reality. When this happens, death magic booms to all realms and the dead begin to rise. Specifically, enough power goes out to raise masses and masses of what we would now call Nighthaunt and keep them active. A lot of times, spirits would erupt around sites of death magic, but if they got too far away, they would kind of dissipate as they lose that power. Well, Nagash put so much into the realms that they can now be self-sufficient. And the Battle Tome actually does a really good job of articulating just how dramatic event this was. It says there's billions of them. I mean, can you just imagine for every other faction in the game, right? Let's say not a death faction, but order, chaos, and destruction. If just a billion enemies spawned, right? Of course, it's not everyone has a billion enemies, it's collectively, but suddenly there can be an army at your doorstep where there was none before. Now, the Necroquake was supposed to be a one-shot win for Nagash, and thereby extension, all Death faction, meaning Soulblight and all that kind of stuff, but the Skaven messed it up. Because they are the true saviors of the universe, and Nagash was supposed to have all these undead that he just rose under his direct command. Instead, they kind of mostly turn into these roving hordes that are just kind of mindless. However, the spell was more effective than I knew before, because part of that control was forming the Nighthaunt into a weapon that Nagash wanted, and he did succeed in that aspect of it. When they were raised the way that he wanted them to be, which is to say, they have a deep hatred for the living, a jealous rage against anyone who breathes, and they want to snuff out all life. Again, those were personality traits that he wanted. He just wanted more control, and he didn't get that. So seeing now that he has, a billion soldiers of an army that are spread all across the realms and kind of disunified, he elects a new Mortarch, Lady Olander, from the region of Dolorum, and I did a whole video dedicated to her, and her job realistically is to go around, collect as many Nighthaunt as you can, and bind them into an army. And so let's kind of move into like what the world is like now, okay? So connecting 2 points that I made earlier. Nagash did succeed in making them the perfect weapon for his bidding. And secondly, this is a faction defined by punishment, where most ghasts and ghouls and all that kind of stuff would appear as these like formless ghosts. Like I guess my mental image is like spirit hosts, that kind of model, where there's not a true form. They're just kind of these wisps that move around. These Nighthaunt, as we know them, are different. Nagash was able to manipulate the soul stuff of the dead to craft a weapon that demonstrates his power and his judgment. And this is absolutely reflected in the model range, and that's really why I think it is one of the most compelling armies to collect. So for example, someone who, let's say they were a criminal in life, and they yearned for death to escape their shackles in prison. Well, when they die, Nagash gives them a form where their afterlife is they're covered in even heavier chains, but now they have to use them as weapons. The same if you have your head inside of like the wooden stocks where your like hands would be like, stuck upward. You'd be like a torture thing. You have to stand up there on your legs and people would mock you. As a chain rasp, many of those models have those exact same things, and they're bound to them for eternity when they thought that they were going to be escaping with their deaths. The afterlife that Nagash crafts for you is a reflection of your life and an eternal punishment for it. And this extends to, if you were a nurse who tried to help people, he'll turn you into a Dreadblade Harrow so that you just mindlessly kill and slaughter, but you see yourself doing it knowing that you want to help people. Like, again, they're just these very macabre and all kinds of nasty punishments. Nagash also then strips back any empathy and gets them all super mad about the living. Why? Because misery, quite literally, loves company in this instance. And so I'm going to end this video like I love ending all of them by simply asking, why is this cool? Right? Why would anyone care about the origins of the Nighthaunt? If this episode seemed a little light on direct facts about the Nighthaunt, that is intentional because their story isn't, just about ghosts and stuff being ethereal and all that jazz. It's a story of one character and their will breaking the natural order of things and turning that brokenness into a weapon and a symbol. Ghosts existed before this, of course. We met a few actually in the Realmgate Wars. It was pretty cool. But Nagash broke Shyish when he did the Necroquake. And as a result, he also warped Afterlives. He destroyed entire belief structures and heavens and hells. He ripped souls from paradise, he forged them into an army, asserted himself as the true judge, no matter what your personal tribe or culture's religious practices were. Now he is the judge. And the arrogance in that is unreal. Like, this is a faction that is defined by the arrogance of Nagash. And we'll discover with various units and heroes, these punishments range from, eternal mental torture to some really weird esoteric stuff that's kind of messed up if you think too hard on it. All because Nagash personally needed control. And that's why I find them compelling, because they do have their own stories. You do have great characters like Lady Olander, Reikenor, the Craven King. It's full of character, but all of that is through the, we'll say, amethyst tinted glasses of Nagash. And I can't think of another army that defines one character's will quite as well. Maybe orcs with Gorka Morka, but I mean, like, Nagash crafted the forms of all of these Nighthaunt to be specific punishments that match these souls. That's like a next level of tinkering. And because of that, I find Nighthaunt to just have an amazing premise. It's an army that I don't really want to build and paint them, mainly because I think I would break them every 5 seconds. But conceptually, they are to me one of the most interesting armies because they do have that mix of character, and it's also dominated by one character's whims. So friends, tell me in the comments down below, what do you think of the Nighthaunt, their origin story, and do you agree that the faction is largely, defined by Nagash's will? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Why do you love the Nighthaunt? Tell me, and we'll chat about it there. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming.